Hi, Devin. I'm going to read to you from 10 Days That Shook the World. And we'll start where we left off. We're in Chapter 2, which, let's go ahead and go to the beginning of Chapter 2, The Coming Storm. All right. Now, in the background of Russian politics began to form the vague outlines of a sinister power, the Cossacks. Novaya Zhizhin, New Life, Gorky's paper, called attention to their activities. At the beginning of the revolution, the Cossacks refused to shoot down the people. While Kornilov marched on Petrograd, they refused to follow him. But from passive loyalty to the revolution, the Cossacks have passed to an active political offensive against it. From the background of the revolution, they have suddenly advanced to the front of the stage. Kaledin, ataman of the Don Cossacks, had been dismissed by the provincial government for his complicity in the Kornilov affair. He flatly refused to resign, and surrounded by 3 immense Cossack armies, lay at Novocherkassk, plotting and menacing. So great was his power that the government was forced to ignore his insubordination. More than that, it was compelled formally to recognize the Council of the Union of Cossack Armies and to declare illegal the newly formed Cossack section of the Soviets. In the first part of October, a Cossack delegation called upon Kerensky arrogantly insisted that the charges against Kaledin be dropped and reproaching the minister-president for yielding to the Soviets. Kerensky agreed to let Kaledin alone, and then is reported to have said, in the eyes of the Soviet leaders, "I am a despot and a tyrant." As for the provincial government, not only does it not depend upon the Soviets, but it considers it regrettable that they exist at all. At the same time, another Cossack mission called upon the British ambassador, treating him boldly as representatives of, quote, the free Cossack people. In the Don, something very like a Cossack republic had been established. The Kuban declared itself an independent Cossack state. The Soviets of Rostov-on-Don and Yekaterinburg were dispersed by armed Cossacks, and the headquarters of the Coal Miners' Union at Kharkov raided. In all its manifestations, the Cossack movement was anti-socialist and militaristic. Its leaders were nobles and great landowners like Kaledin, Kornilov, Generals Dutov, Karolov, and Bardizhe. It was backed by the powerful merchants and bankers of Moscow. Old Russia was rapidly breaking up. In Ukraine and Finland, Poland, White Russia, the nationalist movements gathered strength and became bolder. The local governments, controlled by the propertied classes, claimed autonomy and refusing to obey orders from Petrograd. At Helsingfors, the Finnish Senate declined to loan money to the provincial government, declaring Finland autonomous, and demanded the withdrawal of Russian troops. The bourgeois Rada at Kiev extended the boundaries of Ukraine until they included all the richest agricultural lands of South Russia, as far east as the Urals, and began the formation of a national army. Premier Vinnychenko hinted at a separate peace with Germany, and the provincial government was helpless. Siberia, the Caucasus, demanded separate constituent assemblies, and in all these countries there was the beginning of a bitter struggle between the authorities and the local Soviet of Workers' and Soldiers' Deputies. Conditions were daily more chaotic. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers were deserting the front and beginning to move in vast, aimless tides over the face of the land. The peasants of Tambov and the Tver governments, tired of waiting for the land, exasperated by the repressive measures of the government, were burning manor houses and massacring landowners. Immense strikes and lockouts convulsed Moscow, Odessa, and the coal mines of the Don. Transportation was paralyzed. The army was starving, and in the big cities there was no bread. The government, torn by the democratic and reactionary factions, could do nothing. When forced to act, it always supported the interests of the propertied classes. Cossacks were sent to restore order among the peasants, to break the strikes. In Tashkent, government authorities suppressed the Soviet. In Petrograd, the Economic Council, established to rebuild the shattered economic life of the country, came to a deadlock between the opposing forces of capital and labor, and was dissolved by Kerensky. The old regime military men, backed by cadets, demanded that harsh measures be adopted to restore discipline in the army and the navy. In vain, Admiral Verderevsky, the venerable minister of Marine, and General Verkhovsky, minister of war, insisted that only a new voluntary democratic discipline based on cooperation with the soldiers and sailors' committees could save the army and navy. Their recommendations were ignored. The reactionaries seemed determined to provoke anger. The trial of Kornilov was coming on. More and more openly, the bourgeois press defended him, speaking of him as the great Russian patriot. Burtsev's paper, Obshtchee Dielo, Common Cause, called for a dictatorship of Kornilov, Kaledin, and Kerensky. I had a talk with Burtsev one day in the press gallery of the Council of the Republic. A small, stooped figure with a wrinkled face, eyes nearsighted behind thick glasses, untidy hair, and beard streaked with gray. "Mark my words, young man, what Russia needs is a strong man. We should get our minds off the revolution now and concentrate on the Germans. Bunglers to defeat Kornilov, and back of the bunglers are the German agents. Kornilov should have won." On the extreme right, the organs of the scarcely veiled monarchist Purishkevich's Narodny Tribune, or the People's Tribune, Novaya Rus, New Russia, and Zhivoye Slovo, Living World, openly advocated the extermination of the revolutionary democracy. On the 23rd of October occurred the naval battle with the German squadron in the Gulf of Riga. On the pretext that Petrograd was in danger, the provincial government drew up plans for evacuating the capital. First, the great munitions works were to go, distributed widely throughout Russia, and then the government itself was to move to Moscow. Instantly, the Bolsheviki began to cry out that the government was abandoning the Red Capital in order to weaken the revolution. Riga had been sold to the Germans. Now Petrograd was being betrayed. The bourgeois press was joyful. At Moscow, said the cadet paper Riech, or Speech, the government can pursue its work in a tranquil atmosphere without being interfered with by anarchists. Rodzianko, leader of the right wing of the cadet party, declared in Otro Rossi, which is the morning of Russia, that the taking of Petrograd by the Germans would be a blessing because it would destroy the Soviets and get rid of the revolutionary Baltic fleet. "Petrograd is in danger," he wrote. "I say to myself, let God take care of Petrograd. They fear that if Petrograd is lost, the general revolutionary organizations will be destroyed. To that I answer that I rejoice if all these organizations are destroyed, for they will bring nothing but disaster upon Russia. With the taking of Petrograd, the Baltic fleet will also be destroyed, but there will be nothing to regret. Most of the battleships are completely demoralized." In the face of a storm of popular disapproval, the plan of evacuation was repudiated. Meanwhile, the Congress of Soviets, loomed over Russia like a thundercloud, shot through with lightnings. It was opposed not only by the government, but by all the moderate socialists. The Central Army and Fleet Committees, the Central Committees of some of the trade unions, the peasant Soviets, but most of all, the Tseka itself spared no pains to prevent the meeting. Izvestia and Golos Soldata, the voice of the soldier, newspapers founded by the Petrograd Soviet, but now in the hands of the Tseka, fiercely assailed it, as did the entire artillery of the Socialist Revolutionary Party press, Dielo Naroda, People's Cause, and Volia Naroda, People's Will. Delegates were sent through the country. Messages flashed by wire to committees in charge of local Soviets, to army committees, instructing them to halt or delay elections to the Congress. Solemn public resolutions against the Congress, declarations that democracy was opposed to the meeting so near the date of the Constituent Assembly. Representatives from the front, from the Union of Zemstvos, the Peasants' Union, Union of Cossack Armies, Union of Officers, Knights of St. George, death battalions protesting. The Council of the Russian Republic was one chorus of disapproval. The entire machinery set up by the Russian Revolution of March functioned to block the Congress of Soviets. On the other hand, was the shapeless will of the proletariat, the workmen, common soldiers, and poor peasants. Many local Soviets were already Bolshevik. Then, there were the organizations of the industrial workers, the Fabrichno Zavodskia Komiteti, factory shop committees, and the insurgent army and fleet organizations. In some places, the people prevented from electing their regular Soviet delegates held rump meetings and chose one of their number to go to Petrograd. In others, they smashed the old obstructionist committees and formed new ones. A groundswell of revolt heaved and cracked the crust, which had been slowly hardening on the surface of the revolutionary fires, dormant all those months. Only a spontaneous mass movement could bring about the all-Russian Congress of Soviets. Day after day, the Bolshevik orators toured the barracks and factories, violently denouncing this government of civil war. One Sunday we went on a top-heavy steam train that lumbered through oceans of mud between stark factories and immense churches to Obukovsky Zavod, a government munitions plant out on the Schlüsselburg Prospect. The meeting took place between the gaunt brick walls of a huge unfurnished building. 10,000 black-clothed men and women packed around a scaffolding draped in red, people heaped on piles of lumber and bricks, perched high upon the shadowy girders, intent and thunder-voiced. Through the dull, heavy sky now and again burst the sun. Through the dull sky now and again burst the sun, flooding reddish light through the skeleton windows upon the mass of simple faces upturned to us. Lunacharsky, a slight, student-like figure with the sensitive face of an artist, was telling why the power must be taken by the Soviets. Nothing else could guarantee the revolution against its enemies, who were deliberately ruining the country, ruining the army, creating opportunities for a new Kornilov. A soldier from the Romanian front, thin, tragical and fierce, cried, "Comrades, we are starving at the front. We are stiff with cold. We are dying for no reason. We ask the American comrades to carry word to America that the Russians will never give up their revolution until they die. We will hold the fort with all our strength until the peoples of the world rise and help us. Tell the American workers to rise up and fight for the socialist revolution." And I think that's where I'll pause for tonight. And I love you. I love you, Devin, and I hope you sleep tight and don't let the chappies bite. And we'll read some more of 10 Days That Shook the World by John Reed later. Good night. I love you.